don't have the footage of doing the skeleton, but here's some anatomical studies of taro birds, as well as another extinct giant bird, so you can learn from the anatomy to create your own fantasy mounts and extinct birds, as well as for paleo art in general. This is Titanus Woolery, a large extinct flightless carnivorous bird from the terror bird family called Phorusrhacidae. Living in the Pliocene from 4.9 to 1.8 million years ago approximately, they died out at the end of this time. Named for the ancient Greek mythological Titans, and from Woolery, from the original collector of the fossils' last name, Waller. Fossils have been found in Florida and Texas. This is the only known Phorusrhacidae from North America. All others in this family occur in South America, and one of the most recent species in the family. This reconstruction is based on its close relatives, as much of the skeleton has not been found, including the skull. So this is more theoretical or speculative paleo reconstruction. Here I'm working on the musculature. By working over my skeletal reconstruction, I work on the muscles based on the musculature of modern birds, as well as close relatives, and various other references I looked up in order to try to get it more accurate. Now I'm working on the full reconstruction. There was some evidence before that Titanus might have had claws on the wings, but later evidence suggested that this was just pure theoretical, and the living modern relatives have wings. They just fold a bit differently than most modern birds, but not all modern birds. Now, I based the coloration on predatory birds and thought about how it would be camouflaged in its environment, and looked at a couple different birds and used coloration similar to those birds while working on this. I used different specialized brushes in Procreate to get certain textures, and I made sure to use different layers, a base flatting layer, clipping masks, and I used different brush textures for scales. I also kept the line art on its own layer, duplicated that, and used alpha lock to quickly color the line art. Now this here is an alternate tailed reconstruction, so that it has more of an emu-like fluffy feathery tail, whereas the previous reconstruction showed a theoretical longer tail feathers. A lot of the feathers and surface anatomy of these creatures is very theoretical. We can only look at close living relatives and guess what they look like, which actually is part of the fun of paleo art. You can do whatever you like if you're making a fantasy version or relative of the terror birds. I based the colors of the Antigolornis, you'll see in a little bit once I get to that part, on the Carina cristata, which I might have mispronounced, which is a living relative. And in this case, I did a partial skeletal, partial musculature reconstruction, and then painted on top on a separate layer, using different opacities of layers to see through to the musculature skeletal structure. I also reconstructed the wings with a more shortened feather pattern, because plausibly they had short, non-flighted feathers on their wings for display, but they may have also had soft, ostrich-like plumes for display. It's not clear which one. The living relative, however, has longer feathers on the wings and similar wing folding patterns, so it's not actually clear. There's a lot of guesswork going in with the reconstructing of the extinct animals. A lot of stuff has to just be theoretical and plausible. This large carnivorous terror bird had earlier theories saying they maybe had dinosaur-like clawed hands as well, although most recent evidence suggests they just had short flightless wings, because there's no real evidence they had claws. It's unclear, once again, if the feathers on the wings were more constructed like a flighted bird's wing or more fluffy like an ostrich. I did the more flighted but short wings in this reconstruction. On a layer on top is where I did the line art, and also went back and forth a bit to correct the edges of things, to make things more exact and fit things a bit better. So I advise you remember to use layers when using Procreate. So here I took a public domain image of another extinct giant bird called a Gastornis, which actually predated the terror birds and existed in some of the same places. They went extinct before the terror birds evolved. So an example of convergent evolution, similar body plans for similar ecological niches. Of course, recent evidence shows that Gastornis was most likely a herbivore, whereas the terror birds that came later were carnivores. Gastornis' toes and beak were not hooked, and due to this analysis of bone structure as well, it seemed likely these were large herbivores, because it looked like they had a more herbivorous diet. They were not members of the terror bird family, but instead predated them. This European, Asian, and North American giant extinct bird was another family altogether, an example of convergent evolution, as I said. Creatures evolving similar bodies and often behaviors to fill similar ecological niches, but independently of one another. In the family Gastornidae, then they were about 6 foot 7 inches tall. They had a wide range, as I said, Europe, Asia, and even North America. Theories about how they got to North America from Asia, as they predated them in Asia and Europe, seems to be by crossing from Asia into North America using the Bering Land Bridge, or perhaps another method. The European Gastornis lasted longer than the Asian or North American counterparts, which had went extinct, and they lived during the Eocene and predated the later pterobirds, and existed 56 to 33.9 million years ago approximately. As you see, I gathered various chicken references. These are all public domain images I got online from Pexels or Pixabay. I mixed terrorbird anatomy in with chicken anatomy. I worked out the underlying structure of the muscles, and then I added the feathers. On top of all that, after lightening those layers, on a layer on top, I did the line art, working out exactly where all the feathers are placed. Off screen, I was still looking at the chicken reference, but I made it disappear in this file so that it wouldn't distract from the final line art. I chose randomly to do a rooster when I used a random animal generator, and the first bird that showed up was rooster, so I made a terror chicken. And I'm going to show just a few things here. So I flatted in on its own layer above the background, underneath the line art. By closing all the lines, I can quickly use the selection tool, invert it, and on a separate layer, fill in a solid color. Then by using Alpha Lock, I can fill in the colors without worrying about going over the edges. I can also use a layer on top to do shadows and multiply, and I can also duplicate the line art layer, hide one of them, and Alpha Lock it in order to make quick colored lines. I used various brushes here. I used acrylic and wet acrylic to get some texture in there. Mostly I used a downloaded Adobe pen brush, which has been extremely awesome, that I got for free on the public forums for Procreate downloadable brushes. And I looked at chicken reference to get the colors correct, as well as some of the shading. There was one particular reference I was following more for the shading, though I mixed the colorations a little bit between a couple different references. I also looked at various references to get the exact look of this terror chicken, and as you see by the underlying structure, I actually did take the anatomy into consideration from extinct terror birds. Now, I looked at my previous reference for saddle design to create this endurance saddle, and on top of that, on another layer, I created this nice cat person. Eventually I'm going to flat it down and do versions here where there's a saved line art version as well as a colored in version. And I have the line art on a layer on top, so I can alpha lock it and quickly color in the line art, as well as a flat color layer that I can quickly go on top of. Remember, you can also use clipping mask layers on top if you want to try out patterns, techniques, or layer modes, and not go outside of where you've already flatted down the base color. This is extremely helpful in saving time and effort. Here's where I saved it real quick as a line art. Now as I continue on, I'm coloring the line art and working on a few things. I also remember to put reflected light so that it looks like it's in the same scene. So some of the gold from the feathers ends up getting reflected on the leather surfaces nearby, and a little bit of the blue from the feathers. And I just went through some trouble here to get all the highlights and shadows and everything pretty nice. But I didn't overdo it because this is just more of an example. But I'm pretty happy with my terror chicken and rider, the cat person rider. So I hope this was educational about extinct giant birds, a little bit about Gastornis and the terror birds in general. This anatomy can be used, as I showed, to create your own fantasy mounts and creatures for various fantasy worlds you create yourself. And I showed a good example of how you can use that anatomy mixed with a modern bird to create your own made-up terror bird mount. I hope everyone has fun. Sorry this video's late, but I got sick for a few days. Hope you look forward to the next one. Bye!